Since its foundation in 1913, Waldzug has been committed to building a sustainable future through the manufacturing of long-lasting kitchen and textile care appliances and responsible carbon-neutral production. It means the Swiss firm is well placed to tackle the topic of timelessness in design. And that's exactly what it will do across 3 special episodes of Monocle on Design. The second episode airs on Wednesday 29th of May. We'll hear from designers including Andrea Caputo, Philippe Malouin and Sabine Marcellus.
I think it's about getting input from a diverse source, and then hopefully the outcome is then something surprising and unexpected and not like what a lot of other people are doing.
So tune in for some essential discussion on ensuring quality and longevity are imbued in our homes and workplace with Waldzug.
This is Monocle on Design Extra. It's a short show to accompany our weekly programme, where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Maylie Evans. NYC by Design, better known as New York Design Week, wraps today. Since 2012, it has become an opportunity to recognise local designers across the boroughs of Brooklyn, Manhattan and Queens, as well as a chance for global brands to raise their profile through pop-ups, product launches and exhibitions. It's over to Monocle's US editor Chris Lord, who shares some of his highlights from this year's edition.
This year's event set the stage for the International Contemporary Furniture Fair that happens in New York, which really is, in North America, certainly for global brands, the main on-ramp to get to US consumers, interior designers, architects who are looking for where furniture is heading in a very residential or commercial way. So it is a big commercial event. There is lots of brands that want to do stuff there. And we're going to start first. I went to see Carl Hansen & Sons, the very famous Danish furniture brand, and they had brought in one of their craftspeople from Denmark who looked, I should say, very, very Danish. You know, he had a kind of plaid shirt on, flat cap, dungarees and suspenders on, really looked the part. And they had brought him into their space in Midtown to really show people that while this is a big global furniture maker, there are people making this stuff by hand somewhere in the world, and that is a slow, thoughtful, considered process. I spoke to Head of Product Development Mads Holm Rabjerg and also his colleague Sherry Simcoe, who's the North America Director for Carl Hansen & Sons, and asked them a bit about what the value of bringing design and the craft into the spaces.
We wanted to show the guys visiting the showroom how the important part of our design is in the hands, in the feeling that you have to do something yourself. The finished touch is very important for our furniture. So we give them the chance to have a little bit of that by recreating one of our classic chairs in a miniature version.
Yeah, because there's lots of little Peter's chairs, one of these classics of the brand, right in front of us that I presume people can make and take away with them. Is it important, Sherry, to tell that story here in the US, do you think, to get the market, the buyers, understanding where this is coming from in Denmark?
I think if you touch and feel, and that's what we're trying to do, then it has a whole different appearance to what the furniture is. You connect with it much better than you would have if you just saw a picture in a magazine or online. For someone to sit here and actually be working with the crafts folks and sanding and crafting it themselves, they'll always remember, and when they touch a chair, why it feels the way it does and what goes into making it so special.
Sherry Simcoe there, North America Director for Carl Hansen & Sons. They made the point that we are in a moment in the US where higher interest rates, people thinking again, can they afford that house? Are they going to make the big investment in furniture? And so add-in value like that, they say, is the way that you help people to connect with the product. Los Angeles, where I'm usually based, had its first iteration of Design Miami Los Angeles, as in a big fair of collectible contemporary design. And it's just that question about whether the market can keep pace. In New York, we've seen last 20 years so many global brands cluster themselves around Nomad and around the Flatiron area of New York. What did strike me when I was there in Design Week was just how many, on a slightly smaller scale than those global brands, studios, new spaces opening by New York designers. And it just reminds you how much buying still goes on Park Avenue and Madison. Interior designers physically going into spaces and wanting somewhere that inspires and excites them about the product. I went to see Zach and Fox, which makes very beautiful textiles, wallpapers, rugs, and has just opened back in February a very beautiful new showroom space right there on Park Avenue. Fairly innocuous tower on Park Avenue, not very exciting to look at from the outside. You go into a pretty basic-looking elevator, and then when the doors open, you kind of step into this world that Zach and Fox have made. And I asked Zach Profera, the creative director and founder of Zach and Fox, just to tell me about the influences that fed into the space.
I always say it's a private detective agency meets like academia wonderland. It needs a bit of fantasy.
It's got a slight feel, I would say, of a sort of 50s department store.
I want a pack of cigarettes and a martini. That was the intention, so I'm glad we pulled it off. You know, we found this space during COVID. It was like 2021. We made the decision for a number of reasons, but I've had my own showroom almost since I started 12 years ago. And as we scale up, having a space allows you to tell a different story and tell your own story. You have more control over the narrative when people walk in and the experience. And I think that's important.
Zach Profera there of Zach and Fox. Now, he's not the only one with a new space to show off. I also then zipped across town to Brooklyn to see designers Chen Chen and Kai Williams. They moved into a studio about a year ago, but they just opened last weekend a new showroom space attached to their studio. An amazing, interesting practice that I think started off quite experimental and kooky and quite a lot of humour in there. And that's certainly is part of their DNA. But as their work progresses, you can just see a lot of maturity coming into it and really interesting uses of materiality and process. This new space that they've just debuted, the collection that they had, one thing that really caught my eye, there was these amazing stools that they're making, using a kind of tiling, almost in a graphical sense, drawing out shapes and stuff using tiling. They were inspired by looking at a guy called Henry Chapman Mercer, who founded the Moravian Pottery and Tile Works in the late 1890s in Pennsylvania, protecting a lot of crafts that at the time were disappearing so quickly because of industrialization. And he had this amazing tile pottery craft workshop right there in Pennsylvania. So they went and they looked at the style of making, and now Chen Chen will just explain how they used it in their own inimitable way.
The collection that we're debuting is called The Sacred Tree, inspired by the fact that we're right next to Greenwood Cemetery, and we'd often go walking in the cemetery. You see these giant trees growing out of the tombs, this recycling process where the people have become reborn as the tree. In a way, we were undergoing a rebirth process ourselves, kind of shedding our old studio, rethinking what it is that we wanted to be making now that we're 13 years into being a partnership. The first couple of years, we were just kind of cruising along. We didn't really know what we were even trying to make. 5-6 years ago, we started working with the Future Perfect, created this very high-end collection of almost impossible to replicate. Every piece is unique, collectible design pieces. And now we're thinking that the logistics of dealing with the fact that every piece is unique is a little bit much for us. We're trying to, as much as possible, to design a line of furniture that's more repeatable for us.
Kai, I wonder, when you start working with a big gallery like that, like the Future Perfect, how does that shape the work that you guys are producing these days compared to as you started 13 years ago?
We were making very small products, but also 13 years ago, the Future Perfect was a very different story. They were also selling small products. We've known them for a really long time. We've evolved together. A lot of times we design the pieces to actually fit in a specific space in their showroom. This whole collection for us is maybe a little bit of a growing up phase as well as moving into this new space.
Two designers there, Chen Chen and Kai Williams, who still make things in New York. For some years now, there's been a narrative that New York City and certainly Los Angeles increasingly have become places where it's too expensive to base yourself, to have a studio, to really do your work. But I think that some of the value of something like NYC by Design is saying that there is so much happening here, and there are entry points then for those who maybe are a bit earlier in their career. And there are people out there in New York who are doing amazing work to get people feeling supported as designers on an emerging level. Staying in Brooklyn now, I went to the Brooklyn Metal Works and spoke to co-founder Erin Daly. They've got a show on at the moment about spoons, some of which have been made in the Metalworks itself. A studio education space where people can learn to work with metal in various ways, jewellery and so on, and also to make home design, tableware and what have you as well. Some of it is very useful, straightforward, beautiful made spoons, but there's Everything from beautiful tableware right through to a life jacket that people could put on that had all the brass implements you would ever need if you needed to make an emergency sandwich. So Erin Daly, talk me through what the Metalworks was founded on.
We wanted to create a professional space for working artists who are discipline specific to metalsmithing. So we are practice-based professional studios for artists. We also have an education component where novices and professionals alike can receive education and professional training. And then we have this exhibition space that supports artists who are making amazing work that otherwise largely goes unseen in New York City. They're learning basic fabrication in non-ferrous metals: copper, brass, silver, gold, object making, hollowware, and also jewelry processes, so stone setting, everything that a jeweler might need. We do enameling, which is a beautiful vitreous enamel ancient technique. We also do waxworking. We don't cast here, but we do the waxworking processes. We job it out to the diamond district for the professional side of casting, and then we bring it back in and refine from there.
Erin Daly there, co-founder of Brooklyn Metalworks. And so finally, Switzerland's Consul General, Ambassador Nicolin Jaeger, was on site in this, what I can only describe as a sort of bare bones skyscraper down in the Lower East Side. Very high up, the Swiss had invited a curator called Annabelle Schneider to build this almost relaxing evocation of Switzerland by design. When you get to these levels when consul generals and embassies start getting involved in art or design projects, some of this stuff can end up feeling a little bit like a trot through of a load of products and brands, a little bit commercial and not so exciting. And because it was a little bit far out in a way, it had a lot of character and kind of charm in it. Annabelle Schneider had created this project called Breathe With Me. And while there were all those hallmark brands of Switzerland in there, USM, Laufen, Vitra, and so on. In the middle was a big inflatable cloud-like form which you could go inside, made by Luft and Lawn. So you had all these brands there, but as Annabelle now explains, and you'll hear from Ambassador Nicolin Jaeger just after, it was about getting people to stop in amongst this kind of heady moment for design and take a second out.
I started as a user journey, like a hike through the Alps, for instance. You start with the USM bar, which is very the crafting place, industrial, nourishing over your body. You go into a little landscape area. Then you find this bubble, a cocoon, a cloud. You have to ground yourself a little bit. Spatial design should do that much more. Sit down, meditate, or just find your moment. It's all a bit about spatial well-being.
About spatial well-being, taking a moment away from the city. Ambassador Jaeger, Switzerland at the moment is doing some very interesting work here in the US. The country is helping the Department of Labor to build apprenticeship schemes and understand how apprenticeships work in Switzerland, a huge part of Swiss soft power. What do you think Switzerland could teach New York about design?
I think you can look at design in two ways. You can focus on the aesthetics and just build a nice skyscraper or a single piece of furniture. Or you can look at it as a whole organism where you're going to live in. And that's our mission. You know, Switzerland is a tiny country, but it's like beauty in miniature. You have everything in a small space. And the experience we are providing here reflects that. We wanted here to create a space where emerging designers can showcase their own work, but also reflect on design classics that we have here at disposal.
Switzerland's Ambassador Nicolin Jaeger, who's the Consul General of Switzerland in New York. Coming out of New York City by Design, as I settled into my plane seat on the way out of that city, glad a bit to be off my feet, because you are zipping from one side of Nomad to Brooklyn and back again, and there is so much activation going on coast to coast in America now when it comes to design. And I think design has often struggled to get the recognition that contemporary art has done in a gallery sense and in an institutional sense. And I do think that is really starting to shift in a way, because you've got some breakthrough design gallery brands that have become markers of a certain vision, and therefore the designers are feeling that they can be confident enough to play and do stuff at a different scale that doesn't necessarily have to become a Herman Miller style mega brand. It can be studios like Kai and Chen where they are sort of artist level names, but doing very much design and playful design and having fun with it. There's no doubt that NYC by Design is a commercial event in many ways. It is about activating galleries, it is about activating brands, but there's enough in there, I think, to keep it still feeling like it's part of a proper design scene with a lot of character in it. It's just big and sprawling. And I think the next year now, we do need to reflect on where the market is in terms of recognition of what the value of having very well-made furniture and design is. There is a moment happening there, and I think NYC by Design did sort of capture it.
Monocle's US editor, Chris Lord. And that's all for this week. If you're eager for more design stories, then listen to our main show, Monocle on Design, airing on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. London time. Or if you prefer print, you can pick up a copy of Monocle magazine. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced by me, Maylie Evans. Thank you very much for listening.